Hello YouTube, it's Deesus here, and we recently had a patch 25.2.2, and I'm looking at the patch notes now, and I just kind of want to go ahead and put my opinion out there. I know a lot of people have already posted videos going over the updates, and I didn't have a chance to, so this was for the patch that dropped on 1/26/23, so it's been out for a little while, and I've already been playing a little bit with the patch, and so I just kind of want to go ahead and give some of my insight on it. I've played Hearthstone since 2014 when it came out, so I mean I have definitely kind of seen as the game's changed. So these would just kind of be my thoughts. But there was definitely a weird interaction with the Rogue Legendary that allows you to masquerade as another class, where you were able to quickly reduce this down to 0. And what that resulted in was just Rogues being able to get a 3/5 drop almost right away. Just a very strong card. I also really like the Sinstone Graveyard change. I feel like this is another one that I would agree with. The old one was to summon a 1/1 stealth ghost, and it has +1/+1 for each other card you've played this turn. The new one is it just summons a 1/1 ghost that has a +1/+1 for each card you played this turn without the stealth component. So your opponent at least has a chance to kind of deal with it. It was a lot harder dealing with those stealth enemies. This is also a card that has received 2 patches pretty quick, because when this first came out, it was only 2 cost, and it was just a very powerful card. Um, I don't so much like the Final Showdown change. I realized Final Showdown was being exploited some, especially with the Sinful Brand card only costing 1. People were able to get a 0 cost Sinful Brand. I feel like these two nerfs pretty much go together. I feel like one would not have happened without the other, because in Wild especially, people were able to get multiple copies of Sinful Brand, and if they were already reduced down to 0, that was able to give you a 0 copy. It was very consistent. You get at least 3 Sinful Brand copies, which I've made videos of the Sinful Brand combo, where you're able to just blow someone away by targeting one of their higher health minions with Sinful Brand and throwing your Illidan's with Rush into it. I feel like they've ruined Final Showdown, honestly. Yes, it's not super hard to draw 6 cards in one turn. I just feel like it was already, in my opinion, pretty slow. There was definitely some combos you could do, such as some lifesteal 1 turn kills, where you could exploit those reduced costs. I honestly went ahead and I dusted my Final Showdown. So far, that's the only rework that I went ahead and I dusted. It ruined the card for me, because I mean this is up from 4, now 6, and it's just rough. It is just rough. It's just I don't feel like you're getting payout early enough, and I feel like it can't keep up with the aggressive decks, and it can't keep up with those control decks, and you can't get your combo as fast as the other decks get their combo. I really didn't feel like Demon Hunter was just that OP of a deck to begin with. I think it was probably more of a threat in Standard, which I do not play, so my perspective is a Wild format perspective. But I do not feel in the Wild format. I mean, if you ask me who the top decks were, I'd be Big Priest #1, Pirate Rogue probably #2, if not even Shaman #2. I mean, those I think are neck and neck. So I mean, to me, those are the top 3 decks. Mechathon, 1 turn kill. Druid is kind of up there as one of the meme decks that's kind of getting some more consistency. Oh, and I almost forgot about Secret Mage. I honestly would probably I'm tempted to put Secret Mage probably even above Big Priest. Secret Mage is just kind of a pain to deal with. You have to really pay close attention, and you have a little bit of luck on your part trying to guess which secrets they've played. So, I mean, for me, I really feel like it's unfortunate that they nerfed it that much. Maybe making it 5 would have been workable. I do agree with the Sinful Brand nerf. I think that needed to happen. I feel like they could have nerfed Sinful Brand, and they could have kept Final Showdown alone. That's my opinion. Let me know what you think in the comments. Okay, so Shock Spitter. I wanted so bad to make a successful Shock Spitter deck. I was never really able to do one super great. I've played some that other people have come up with that was pretty consistent. I could see this being far stronger in standard, where you're not competing against the crazier stuff that WoW format brings. I don't really feel like the nerf broke the card by any means. I mean, the old one was 3 mana, 2 attack, 2 health. New is 4 mana, 3 attack, 3 health. So you are at least getting an additional attack and health, which, I mean, that's obviously not why you would run this card. You run this card because you want to deal 1 more damage and improve it each time your hero attacks. Exploit that by either having multiple copies or using Bronzebeard. I do feel like this slowed the combo down. I don't feel like the combo was that big of a threat to begin with. However, I do agree that this deck was pretty consistent. Probably still could be pretty consistent, especially in the standard format. And I feel like that's probably where the nerf is coming from, is more so standard. Because if you had a pretty aggressive beast deck, and then you combined, the extra damage you were dealing with this, you were able to get fatal pretty quick. Alright, so next one is Glacial Advance. So the old one was deal 4 damage, and your next spell this turn costs 2 less. The new one is deal 4 damage, and your next spell this turn costs 1 less. I absolutely agree with this nerf. I feel like just the overall burstiness of Frost Death Knight was kind of even hard to contend with in wild format. I'm sure it was, pretty solid in standard as well, and just the amount they can combo once they kind of have the mana to play around with, from reducing their spells. I guess this is not the only card they have that can reduce spells. Obviously, you'll run a lot of frost spells as a Frost Death Knight, and you'll have ways of copying those stronger spells in your hand using your legendary. So I mean, I think it was something that was needed, and I don't feel like it broke the card. I still think the card is good. So I know this is the card I think most people are going to be complaining about the nerf on. I feel like it's definitely warranted. I mean, it was in 60% of all decks, according to Hearthstone Replay. So Aslar Bloodsworn, and I honestly don't even feel like this was much of a nerf. So the old one is Battle Cry. You add the Protector to your hand, Mana Thirst 4, deal 2 damage. So now the new one is Mana Thirst 5, deal 2 damage. But it's still going to give you the 5-drop, which now it's Battle Cry, add Aslar the Flamebringer into your hand, Mana Thirst, gain 5 armor. I feel like the biggest nerf actually happens here, because I feel like in the old one, Mana Thirst 7, you gained 5 armor. Like, you already pretty much had 7 mana when you dropped this, because a lot of people were dropping the 2 and then instantly dropping the 5, so you were able to get that armor, that little defensive component, a little bit early, so that you could build into your late game combos, and you're not getting fatal damage done to yourself. So I feel like, to me, that's what hurt the most. Not so much this nerf, because dealing 14 damage is still solid, still Mana Thirst 10. I mean, you're only losing 2 damage, guys. I mean, come on, that's not that significant, especially since you can spam the heck out of Aslar still. You still make multiple copies of him. I mean, it still cost 8. Honestly, this is how I would have fixed the card. I would have kept the Mana Thirst pretty much consistent with what it was. I would have kept the damage consistent with what it was. I would have made this cost 3. I would have made this cost 6. And I would have made this cost 10 or 9. But I guess, at that point, it wouldn't really be, Mana Thirst. I just really feel like this should be 16 damage, and it should cost 10 mana, because no one was playing it outside of Mana Thirst anyway, for the most part, unless you just could get Fatal. But I do like the Mana Thirst component, so I know that would kind of ruin it. But I do feel like if they really wanted to nerf it, they could have just increased the overall cost, maybe kept Mana Thirst similar ranges, and just kind of went from there. I feel like they've probably hurt the early game quite a bit, because before it was 4, now it's 5. I feel like by the time you have 5 mana and you can trigger this Mana Thirst ability, most of the stuff on the board is going to have more than 2 health. So these following cards were able to get buffs. So you have I gotta go get the pizza real quick. Okay, so the following cards have been adjusted to be more powerful. So we have the Battlefield Necromancer. The old one was at the end of your turn, you got to raise a corpse that was a 1/2 risen, and now it is a 1/3 risen. I mean, I think that's a valid buff. I honestly did not use the Battlefield Necromancer too much. I know that it was in several unholy decks. It was still being used. I really didn't play the unholy variant. I mostly played the blood kind of control variant. Um, so that is something I really can't speak much on. But I mean, to me, I think that's fair. Bone Guard Commander, old, was taunt to battle cry, raise up to 6 corpses as 1/2 risen footmen and taunt. New is taunt, battle cry, raise up to 6 corpses, 1/3 risen with taunt. I feel like this is actually very strong. If you have the corpses, so you're getting an 8/8 drop just straight up. You're using 6 corpses, but I mean, I guess I'm just comparing this to like the Druid's card that summons a whole bunch of like 1/5 taunts for 6 mana, which granted it kind of depends on like your opponent having minions down on the board, but it's like you take a card like this, you do that, and if you have anything that can like buff your minions or something, I feel like that's pretty generous. I feel like that's pretty strong. I mean, I feel like even with 1/2s, I do think 1/3 makes sense for a taunt minion just because there's so many spells that can contend with a 1/2. But at the same time, you're still making your opponent use a clear spell to get rid of your minions. So I don't. To me, I feel like 1/3 might be overkill. Unholy Frenzy. So the old one was 3 mana. The new is only 2 mana. So Unholy Frenzy is you get to choose an enemy minion for your minions to attack, resummon any that died. I think this is a huge buff. I hope we get to see some more aggressive undead decks. I mean, I think this is a fantastic chance because with 3 mana, that is a little extreme. For 2 mana, I mean that kind of aligns it with some of the other cards we kind of see in Hunter. So I think that was a good change. I'm also excited about this change as well. So this is Wither. You get to choose a minion, and each friendly undead steals 1 attack and 1 health from it. And I actually plan on making a deck using Wither later and having some fun with kind of an aggro druid. So the old one was 2 mana, now it is 1 mana, and I think that's awesome. I feel like this will help us get some really early combos where we could maybe get some really strong minions on the board depending on what our opponent has on the board, and we can do it kind of earlier. Bone Collar, I also think this is pretty cool. 2 attack, 4 health. Now it's 2 attack, 5 health. I do agree that a lot of these undead needed some buffs. So this one I actually feel is pretty strong. I was wanting to make a priest deck that was a death rattled centered priest deck that kind of exploited just getting a whole bunch of haunting nightmares. Especially since you can trigger death rattles multiple times, and then they also have other cards like the High Cultist, which I think this one definitely needed buffed. That one was not that great or impressive. 11 legendary. This one I actually felt was fair, but I mean 4/3 that's even stronger. I mean I really think that with 3/3 it was still pretty strong, but I mean they could still be silenced and things like that. This one I was a little disappointed in. So the old is 8 mana, the new is 7. Um, I still feel like it could be better, but that's just because there's not a lot of undead synergy yet. I could see this card getting nerfed as soon as we have like the same number of resurrection for undead specific cards that we do for demons for Warlock. Where if Warlock was able to consistently get 2 or 3 of these guys out, I could see it being a bigger threat. With that said, even though I have expressed being a little disappointed in it, this is still one of my favorite cards. I do hope that I can figure out a way to make a pretty competitive wild deck using this card. I know some people have been able to, like using Gelatinous Cube and some other cards or Carnivorous Cube and some other cards to exploit getting more of these out. Again, I mean, just Secret Mage is something that's just going to shut a lot of these down. Any deck that relies on just a couple of minions are going to get objectioned to death, and it is just no bueno. You have your Infantry Reanimator. This was definitely needed. Now only 5 mana, you're able to resurrect a friendly and give it Reborn. So that's really good. That's going to help make our Darkhan stick more. Definitely something I feel that needed to happen. This one I feel is a little laughable. Really, I mean, yeah, it's one mana less, but it's already going to cost one less for each outcast you've played this game. And this card was only ran in decks that were running a bunch of outcasts. I mean, you absolutely will be able to play this card almost right away. So I don't really know how big of a buff that really was. I feel like it should have been like buffed to like a 6/6. Make it more in line with like some of Mage's cards that get discounted because of secrets. I think the only thing really advantageous that this one has going for it is it does at least have Rush. So I really haven't played a bunch of Energy Shaper, but it's transform all spells in your hands into one that costs 2 more. They keep their original cost. So the old is 4 mana, the new is 3. I mean, I think that would be pretty fun to play in like a casino type mage where you're just kind of YOLOing. Alright, I absolutely both hate and love the Vast Wisdom. So the fact that it now costs 2 mana just means that those Quest Mages are probably going to become a little more consistent. I still think Secret Mage is probably going to control like the primary mage like meta in Wild, but the fact that this now only costs 2 mana, I mean, you're going to discover spells that cost 3 or less, swap their costs. I mean, odds are, you're going to get probably at least one free spell anyway, and it only costs 2 instead of 3. I just think it's a really good card. I feel like it was strong before. I feel like it was probably about right before, and now I feel like it's a little too strong. But we'll see. Time Warden. Battle Cry until the end of your next turn. Dragons you summon gain Taunt and Divine Shield. I do think that this was needed. 4 mana just was not giving you enough mana to really play with. Outside of like maybe like a Reno dragon deck where you have discounted dragons or you are playing cards that are already discounting your dragons, I could see this being pretty strong. But there's also cards that can just straight up wipe a field regardless of what you've got. So I don't know. I kind of think it's hit and miss. I think this was a very strong buff. So I have made a video of Grand Shield before where I was able to steal a 9 mana cost legendary spell to summon, a full board of undead that I copied from the Death Knight I was going against. I think the Grand Shield could be quite strong. I think it's good that they've now added Taunt. So this was a little different than the original version. And so now you can kind of play this card to copy a spell you might want, but then it also is giving you a body with Taunt, so hopefully it can like protect you from a hit. Probably makes it a little safer to play. So I think it's a great card. Now this one is the old attack was 4 attack, 5 health. Now it's 4 attack, 6 health. I think this is a great card too. I mean, at the end of your opponent's turn, it discards a spell. I kind of wish they would discount that down to 4 mana, but I feel like it's a pretty decent buff. Last Stand. So I have heard people talk about how Last Stand was literally the worst card in the game. So the old 4 mana, draw a taunt minion, double its stats. The new is 1 mana, draw a taunt minion, mana thirst 7, double its stats. I mean, I agree because I watched another video on this one and I don't disagree. I mean, I think most people's argument for Last Stand and like why this is going to be held as a buff instead of a nerf is because people really were not using this card so much to get double the stats. They were using it to search for a taunt minion, maybe a specific taunt minion. So I mean, in that regard, I mean, it makes sense. Being able to double its stats is nice, but I mean, you really just want to get that minion. So I could see why this is a buff. Nilly's Pirate Ship. So the old was Taunt, Death Rattle, add Nilly's Pirate Crew to your hand. They cost 1 less. I remember when they used to cost 0, and that was insane. Now it's new. Taunt, Death Rattle, add Nilly's Pirate Crew to your hand. They cost 2 less. So I do think that's pretty cool, just because we are getting some pirates now that cost more. Um, Now we have the Living Blade. The old was 4 attack, 10 health. Now it's 5 attack, 10 health. I'll be honest, I think this card was insane to begin with. I have seen people be able to get the attack up to like 40 and have like a 40-40 sword, which is absolutely nuts. I mean, this is just, it's a good card. It is such a good card. So, yeah, I don't think this needed a buff. So these are my thoughts. I look forward to playing some more Hearthstone. I don't know if I'm going to play a whole lot more ranked or if I'm going to kind of focus on Battleground. I mean, once I hit Legend for a season, I kind of tap out on that. I don't really plan on going high Legend this season. We'll kind of see what next season brings. I plan on playing some duels, maybe some Battlegrounds. So if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel. I love hearing from you guys. Let me know your thoughts below. We do more than just Hearthstone on this channel. Go check out some of our other videos. We have Pokemon, Rust, and Rec Room. I plan on playing some other new games, me and my friends. So go ahead and follow us. Click those notifications so you can see what's happening next. And I look forward to growing the channel with you guys. Thanks for watching, and let me know what you think about these nerfs and buffs.